Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Talking with Coach Troy, where I interview really interesting people who do really cool stuff. And today, there's no exception. I'm going to interview a guy who has an incredible background, really interesting fella, really great athlete, really great leader. Kimo Seymour, president of events and media for Lifetime Fitness. Kimo, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Troy. Thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks. So I remember meeting you years ago. First of all, when I moved out to Arizona years ago, I remember hearing of this guy named Kimo. I didn't know who he was. I was from the East Coast. So I never really knew who you were, but I heard that he was a incredibly strong cyclist and just kicking everybody's butt, but he was also having events. He was an event production company. He had a race production company. And I remember hearing about you, but I just never got a chance to meet you. And then finally I did get a chance to meet you, but taking a step back for a second, tell us about your history in the world of event production.
Good question. I got into the business of event production by acquiring a small event production company based in Arizona called the Red Rock Company back in 2008. Had a good friend named Tim DeBoom, who was a previous two-time Ironman world champion winner. And another good friend named Mike Melly, who I was working with, and the three of us got together and said, gosh, this might be an opportunity to kind of get in and work in an area that we all had a passion. So Tim was kind of nearing retirement in his career, and Melly and I were moving on from a career in real estate development, and just through some dumb luck had an opportunity to acquire this little company. So we ended up running that company for about 4 years before selling it to Lifetime, and that's how I got on board with Lifetime back in 2011, 2012.
Yeah, and I think that's where I met you at a certain meeting there at that around that time. So
I think we actually didn't we actually met, wasn't it before that? Wasn't it in Hawaii? Didn't we connect out in Hawaii even? Maybe
yeah,
it was that an Ironman that year, maybe 2011.
2000. Well, yes,
Did we race
2011
together?
was the last time I did it. Yes, so we would have. Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. If I recall, I think we swim pretty much the same. I think we bike close. You're a little bit faster than me, but I think I run a little bit faster than you.
Yeah, you did. I remember seeing you run away from me. That was it. I remember thinking, he'll be back. And you were never back.
I have to have at least one strength, and that was about it. But so but athletically, I want to talk about that for a second. So you were a serious Ironman athlete, but you also you were a mountain biker, and I think you really kind of created your persona around the mountain bike piece. And if I'm not mistaken, you even competed in and maybe even won a big event here in Tucson called 24 Hours of the Old Pueblo, right? Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, that was actually Mike Melly, who I mentioned a little earlier. He and I were doing a lot of Ironman racing back in kind of 05, 06, 07. And he said, I think it was in 2000, the end of 2006, he came and said, you ought to try doing one of these mountain bike races and just see how you can do it. So we went a month before 24 Hours in the Old Pueblo. He took me out and I bought a single speed Gary Fisher rig and rode it a couple times, and then went down to Old Pueblo, and that was my first real mountain bike race, and ended up riding. I think the only reason I won is because I was the only guy that didn't go to sleep that night, and just kept on riding, and what do you know, ended up winning that silly race. It's pretty cool. Todd Sadow does an amazing job down there with that event, so it was pretty cool.
It's a cool event for sure. That's an amazing feat, especially since you just got into it. I have a ton of respect for that. I just did my first single speed event. Well, this year, first time doing it single speed solo. And yeah, that's a different animal altogether. I like it though. It's weirdly fun.
Yeah, it was. I think that's the longest ride I've ever done. If I recall, it was 289 miles, about 25 hours. So yeah, it was crazy.
That's good for you. So you got in, so operating or racing as an elite athlete, and obviously running a very successful event production company. You joined Lifetime, and then your trajectory was to become president of the events division, which oversees, most of the iconic events in the U.S., a pretty amazing group that you've built. So tell us a little bit about that, about some of your portfolio of events at Lifetime?
Speaking to the portfolio today, we're pretty heavily we're heavily loaded kind of in what I would call the I'll call them dirt events, right? Where I've seen a lot of the growth over the last few years has been in events that happen on dirt, whether it's running or riding a bicycle, and whether it's a gravel bike or a mountain bike. It seems to be that's the trend in endurance sports is getting off of pavement, whether it's for cyclists wanting to get away from cars and people that are distracted at 60 miles an hour, or runners trying to avoid injury from all the pounding on the pavement. It feels to me that the trend is kind of going towards, more and more towards getting off of pavement. So we've had some success over the last few years, both building up a few of our own events and then acquiring a few. So some of our bigger events include the Leadville 100 run, the Leadville 100 mountain bike, and a few other events we host up there. Recently, a year and a half ago, acquired the Dirty Kanza, which is kind of the Super Bowl of gravel racing, if you will, in the U.S. On the road running side, we still have a couple really big, significant events. Miami Marathon is a big one for us that we kick off the year each year, and then kind of end the running year with Chicago Half Marathon in the fall as a good lead up to the Chicago Marathon. So we've got a good variety of events, but the portfolio has really evolved over the 8-9 years I've been with the company. We've seen a significant decline in triathlon participation. I think the sport in general has seen some pretty significant decline, and we've certainly experienced that. We still have 4, marquee events here in the U.S. in Chicago, New York, Minneapolis, and escape to Miami. But we are seeing, a pretty significant decline in participation in traditional triathlon, if you will. So, but we're pretty fortunate. We've narrowed it down to about a little over 30 events, and we're seeing some good success, particularly and good significant growth in the events that take place, as I said, off of pavement.
Right. What do you attribute that to? I know we've had similar discussions, but why do you think people are gravitating away from triathlon and going to dirt?
This would be purely anecdotal. I don't have good hard evidence around it. I think some of the more marquee endurance events that have popped up over the years, and some of them have been around for a long time and then hit people's radar over the last few years. I think that's lured people to more single discipline type sport. So it's funny. I joke that you go, Leadville nowadays, compared to when I started racing it 13 years ago, you walk around that town, you can't go around a corner without seeing somebody with an M.Dot tattoo on their calf or carrying an Ironman backpack. And so I think a lot of people similar to me kind of transitioned away from triathlon and taking on other endurance endeavors. And I think ultimately, the pounding and the demands of training for 3 disciplines. I mean, it's hard to maintain that as a long-term lifestyle, and you've been there and been in and out of being able to, continually train. You think about the demands that puts on your body, on your time, what it takes away from family, what it takes away from work. It's hard to sustain that over a long period of time. And so I think a lot of those endurance junkies, we're seeing a move to things like ultra running and let's call it ultra cycling, long distance mountain bike or gravel events now.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and especially the point around safety. I mean, you always hear about cyclists on the roads getting hit nowadays, more so than ever, it seems, for whatever reason. So the gravel component, riding off-road, that's such a big, important piece to the puzzle. I know at Lifetime, there's been an effort to bring triathlon back into the forefront with the indoor tri over the years. And that seems to have been successful. What's your feeling of that format and how it relates to, like the Chicago Tri and getting more people engaged?
That's been as you know from your time with us here over the years, that's been a really important kind of key initiative to get new athletes into the sport. I think that's where triathlon has struggled, is that it's as I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily for a lot of athletes, it's not necessarily a lifestyle. And we see a lot of athletes, and the trends are that they get themselves, one way or another, the the entry drug is a a short distance triathlon, and then eventually they work their way up to a 70.3 or an Ironman distance event. And we know from statistics that they don't stick with those long term, right? It's some of them it's one and done, some of it's a handful, but it's challenging when you're in a business that you've got a customer base that will only buy your product a handful of times and they move on. Means you need to constantly be cultivating that customer base. And so the indoor try for us has certainly been, and when back under your leadership, it was probably when it was the most successful at really introducing new athletes to the sport of triathlon. And then we've had pretty good success at moving them from those indoor triathlons out to our sprint Olympic distance series around the country.
Yeah, sure. So right now we're in the COVID pandemic, and obviously all events or a lot of events have been postponed or canceled. How's that affecting some of your iconic events?
But when we were talking before we got on here, we've canceled all of the Leadville events through the summer. We've canceled a handful of other events. I'd say it's highly likely there will be more coming up. We're obviously in every instance where we host events, we're working closely with state and local officials to make sure we're following the guidelines that are set forth by the state. And for the most part, states are adopting guidelines that are being handed down by the CDC. For us, we pride ourselves not only on kind of the iconic nature of our events, but also the phenomenal experiences that we create for our athletes. And we differentiate our events through the experiences that we create beyond just the fact that it's quote unquote a race. And for us, the internal debate is, with some of the limitations and the restrictions that are being put in place, does it make sense? What does that do to the experience that we're providing to our athletes and our loyal followers and customers, if you will. And in many cases, we're making the decision that the restrictions are so prohibitive that it's just not the experience that we think we want to provide. We don't think people are going to come away from some of these events and be really excited about how the experience went, So, and that's okay. I mean, it's tough decisions to make, but and given everything that's going on in the world, it's not a huge sacrifice if we have to, if we're not able to produce some events this year, if that's what state and local authorities feel is the right thing to do.
Right. What's your feeling around the mentality of the endurance athlete at this time, as they are in this position where they started to train for an event for Leadville, for example? The demand and the training time and effort, energy you put into it, and all of a sudden these events go away. What's your advice or feeling around what they need to do to continue being engaged and maybe get ready for the event next year? What's your advice?
My advice is for them to keep dreaming. Leadville's we'll be back. I think we'll look back on this at some point in the future, and hopefully from an endurance standpoint, not to minimize what's happening in the world, but from an endurance standpoint, I think we'll look at this as a blip on the radar, right? I think events, the iconic events that ultimately do what's right for the athletes and for the athletes' family and friends, and maybe most importantly for the communities where the events occur. I think they'll be back, and we'll all, hopefully we'll all have the opportunity to participate in these events again. And so I'd encourage them to, people to keep training. And in many cases, it might be a good idea, for some people to actually take a little time off. As endurance athletes don't have, aren't real good at taking a little time off and letting their body rest and recover, right? And I think if you and I could go back 20 years, we probably would have gone a little easier on our bodies every now and then to make sure we could rest and recover. So it's not a bad idea, I think, to let some of those injuries heal, do a little bit of strength training, do a little bit of, do some core and some stretching and some yoga, and take good care of your body in this time. You don't need to beat yourself up. If you don't have something that's just, on the books that, to look forward to, say, this summer, I do think it's a great time for people, stay motivated, but take the opportunity to be good to yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to talk about you for a second. You have done Leadville. You have the buckle, 13 times, 12 times? Is it 12? Or 11? How many
This
times?
this last year was number 13.
Number 13. Okay. So that's amazing. So for those people who don't know, Leadville 100 mountain bike race, what's it start at 10,000 feet, goes up to 14,000 roughly, and then hovers in that area. Lots of gain, incredible event. So what's your secret? Like, how do you go out year after year after year and not only get yourself fired up, but not only do you finish, but you go fast. So what's going through in between your ears to make you do that year after year?
I think some of it is confidence built after doing it so many years in a row. I think some of it is for me is I do actually take a fair amount of time off, and as I like to joke, I let myself get fat over the winter and take it easy. And usually about January, my wife Julie says, "Okay, it's not funny anymore. It's time time to start getting yourself back in shape."
The love handles have to go away.
Lay off the chocolate. Yeah, and so I think given yourself that, or myself, that break each year, or a little bit of time where I just kind of take it easy, I think is really important. But then I really just enjoy. I tell people this a lot. Back when you and I were doing Ironmans, the reason I gave up doing some of those longer distance triathlons is I'm just an age group guy trying to be as fast as I can be, but I found myself going out and doing workouts because I had to, not because I wanted to. And I think by giving yourself a break, taking that little bit of time, I get fired up, and I love the summer I love every single time I go out the door to go do a long ride or a trail run or something. And I think that's important for people to recognize, get yourself, if you're going out the door because someone's telling you have to, or you're telling yourself have to, not that you want to, you probably shouldn't be doing it unless you're doing it for a living. And most 99.99% of us aren't. So I think taking it easy a little bit in the winter, train hard and have fun in the summer, and then it comes down to race day. I think I've just, knock on wood, I've got kind of nutrition and pacing dialed in. That's what it comes down to in a race like that. You've been up there, and it really is who eats the best and paces the best, right? And that's how I get through it every year.
So if we were to take all 13 times and take out your best time and your worst time, what would be around your average finish time for that race? Do you have just a general idea? Is it
Best and well, my best and worst are only about 30 minutes apart. So I'm going to guess somewhere between, I'm going to say somewhere around 7:40 is probably the average.
7:40?
Yeah.
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 That's fast for everyone.
I've been lucky. I did that first one, I broke 8 hours by 2 minutes on that first one. Had no idea what I was doing. Had never seen an inch of the course, and just went out there and felt like I got lucky, and I've managed to keep them all under that time since then. So
That's great. So what's next for you then, post COVID-19 and some of the postponement and shutdown? What's next on your race calendar for yourself?
oh, for myself, I'm still hopeful that with Dirty Cans at the beginning of September, September 12th is the rescheduled date.
Okay.
So I'm planning to we'll be out there, obviously, if we're fortunate enough to get to host the event. And I'm planning on jumping in and giving it a ride.
Okay. No flat tires this year?
2 years in a row, I've had some pretty crummy luck out there, but maybe it's more maybe me, not luck. But
Third
yeah,
time's a charm. That's what they say, at least, right?
I hope so, Troy.
Kimo, how can somebody find out more about Lifetime events?
Best is to go to if you know the particular event, go to the website for the event. Otherwise, go to the Lifetime website, and click on the events tab there at the top, and you get down and see all the great events we put on around the country.
Yeah. And it's the whole integrated piece, right? Not only can they do the events, but then the experience they have at the clubs is just amazing. So it just develops the whole person.
That's what we hope. We hope to give people kind of, we think of the events business as being kind of aspirational for the people that are certainly, that are club members, and about 10% of our participants every year in our events are actually lifetime members, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
So they're kind of, getting to feel the whole ecosystem, which is really part of the big picture for us.
Healthy way of life. Yep.
Yeah.
Kimo, thanks for signing on. I really appreciate it.
You bet.
Good luck with everything. All right,
Thanks,
everybody.
Troy.
Yeah, sure thing, man. And everybody, thank you for checking in today. Please make sure you check back again as we continue to interview really interesting people. And until next time, train safe and train smart.